Hello, welcome to the Hockey Show. My name is Roy Bellamy, David Dwork of the Hockey News. We got good news for you. The Florida Panthers have clinched a playoff spot.
You got the X.
Yeah, they got the X. We got bad news, though. They've lost 6 of the last 7. It's been a tough time. Obviously, it's been because of injury, but, my goodness. The Panthers, on time, for the big games, they played well. They played well versus the Rangers. They played well versus the Bruins, but
yeah.
Last night's game, they still came up short. Very close games, but last night's game against the Islanders, and it hasn't been a good situation for them, losing 6 out of the last 7. But let's go over the week that was for the Florida Panthers. Let's start on Saturday at the Garden. They lost in the shootout 4-3 to the New York Rangers. They did not have Alexander Barkov. They did not have Aaron Ekblad. Dmitry Kulikov was suspended, second game of that suspension, and
Forsling
Gus
also was
Forsling.
Yep. No, that's and this is another game like the Panthers had a lead. They scored the first goal. Matthew Tkachuk got. I think they had a 2-0 lead actually in that game. The Rangers. And look, credit to the Rangers. They're an amazing team. They've got maybe the best goalie in the league right now, arguably. You and I kind of agree on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a tough time for the Panthers, and that was look. I'd love to see the Panthers and the Rangers in a playoff series. That game made me want that, and so did the Bruins game actually.
I would love to see that as the conference final. Hopefully.
Yes.
We'll see. Matthew Tkachuk scored the first goal in that game. It was good to see that. But eventually they ended up going down in the shootout.
Blown third period lead, a trend that we've seen a lot over the last week.
Way too many times. It was the first half of a back-to-back. They went to Philadelphia, and they won that game.
That was nice.
They did get back Kulikov, who served that suspension, though.
Yes.
But they did not have Barkov. They did not have Ekblad or Forsling.
Nope, but they did have goals from Sam Reinhart. They got a goal from Vladimir Tarasenko that game, and I believe Carter Verhaeghe scored in the third period, which he's done so often this season. And it was just nice to see the Panthers bounce back because they played such a tough game in New York, and that was on the heels of them going through a really tough stretch where they'd been struggling. They had that really good effort at the Garden. The next day, you're like, oh, it's the day after. It's back-to-back. It's on the road. And no, they came out and played a really solid game in Philadelphia that made you think, okay, they're starting to come out of this.
All right. They came back home. They faced the Bruins. That was the big one.
Yes.
That was the one that we were all looking forward to. That was the one where they could have potentially gotten past the Bruins in the Atlantic Division, but that did not happen. They did get Barkov and Forsling back. There were some milestones in that game, David.
Yeah. What about that game? Let's see. The Panthers had a third period lead again. I believe that was the game where they took 2 third period penalties, including a delay of game by Evan Rodriguez that Paul Maurice was like, you're not going to eat a guy's lunch. Obviously, he doesn't mean to do something like that, but you cannot take 2 late penalties. In terms of the milestones, was that Barkov night?
No, Barkov night was against the Islanders. That was Eetu Luostarinen.
That was Eetu night. Oh,
Yeah.
Right. He had the 3-game point streak. He had his 100th career point. And just talking about Eetu Luostarinen, this is a guy who I think we're going to like in a Panther sweater for a while just because he does so many things right on both ends of the ice. Him, Lundell, they're like little mini Barkovs out there. They've got the great guy to learn from. And, yeah, you know this. We are big fans of Eetu Luostarinen.
Oh, yeah. A lot of mistakes can be cleaned up when those guys are in the lineup. I failed to mention, by the way, Sam Reinhart got his 49th and 50th goals versus the Flyers.
How could we forget that?
I don't know.
We've been waiting for Reinhart to hit 50 for a while. Like, we knew that he was going to be the second Panthers player to hit 50 goals, like after Pavel Bure did it twice.
Yeah.
But, man, what a great year Reinhart's having. At this point, I am just eagerly awaiting how his contract situation plays out. Him and Florida want to get something done. They've had some talks. Hasn't really picked up a lot I haven't heard much over the last month. But you'd think they want to get something done maybe before the summer, as Florida has they got it done with Forsling.
Yep.
So, between Montour and Reinhart, the Panthers have a couple big free agents that they're going to have to deal with ahead of this playoff run that they're about to go on.
Back in the Bruins game, I wanted to particularly point something out that happened. The Panthers, as you said, blew that lead. They were up 3-2.
Yes.
At about 5:43 left in the third period in regulation, and Jordan McPherson of the Miami Herald pointed this out, the in-game entertainment crew played peppers. At 5:43 left in the third period. And then the Panthers immediately gave up 2 goals.
But you see, they've done this in the past, and it hasn't been a problem.
I don't know about that.
No, they've played Pepas at the arena early, and Now, I mean, look, this is kind of going because it's a Miami Heat thing. Like, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's a Miami Heat thing. The Miami Heat played Pepas. They went on an incredible NBA Finals run, and it was super fun. The arena would go crazy, but it would happen with like a minute to go in a game that they were going to win, and it was like the victory song, the victory salute.
Yeah.
So the Panthers doing it a little early. I don't know. I get the apprehension, but they've done it before at the arena. I've heard it before. Early enough in a game that they haven't blown a lead. So I think maybe this is more of a product of a current funk than it is a poo-poo on Pepas.
Well, it is a poo-poo on Peppers. I'm blaming this poo-poo on Peppers. Last night, not great. They played the Islanders, who right now are a desperate club right now. They are trying to get into the playoffs. They played themselves out. They're trying to get back in.
That was a big win for them.
Yeah, that was a huge win for them. The Panthers, for the past 2 games, including the Bruins game, had a chance to clinch a playoff spot. Basically, they needed help during the Bruins game. But by themselves last night, they could have made the playoffs, but they ended up losing 3-2 against the Islanders. That was also a milestone game. That one was for Alexander Barkov.
That was Barky game.
700 points. 700 points.
It's pretty unbelievable.
I mean, he's young. He's young. He started
28.
his career early, but he is young, and he's already gotten 700 points in his career. And that's just amazing to me. But
it's pretty awesome. And this is his 4th season with at least 50 assists, and he's got another 10 games to go.
Yeah, absolutely. The Panthers, following the game, ended up clinching a playoff spot, and that was because the Detroit Red Wings lost 4-0 to the Carolina Hurricanes. So thank you, Carolina, for that. So that's the week in Panthers hockey. Those 4 games, we saw that the Panthers scored first.
Yes, they did.
In all 4 of those games.
And third period leads.
Blown.
No, except for the one they won.
Except for the one they won in Philadelphia. But yeah, that 4 straight games of them scoring first and them going 1-2-1. That's not Panthers hockey there.
Well, what we have to find out over the next 2.5 weeks is this a wake up call that they is going to get them snapped into form ahead of the postseason starting, which is in just a few weeks, or the alternative, which I don't even want to say out loud. After the season that they've had, after the finals run they had last year, it looked like the stars were aligning. Everything was falling into place for the Panthers. So I don't even want to say out loud the alternative. Let's just say this is a funk for them, that they're going to wake up, they're going to learn what they need to learn, and they're going to go into the playoffs and do what they're going to do.
I just want to revel for the next 2 minutes on the fact that this is the 5th consecutive season that the Panthers have clinched a playoff spot.
Crazy.
Considering that for the first 25 years, they've had 5 playoff appearances before they ended up getting 5 straight in the past 5. I mean, my God. I mean, if you think about this as somebody who's cheered for this team for 30 years and who has covered this team for a very long time, it almost seems miraculous that they've gone to the playoffs or will go to the playoffs for a 5th consecutive season.
You have to almost take a step back because being in it, because it's not just like we've been following teams since it started in 1993. We've covered the team pretty closely for over a decade now, but to kind of have to take a step back because we've been so ingrained in it, like you just kind of broadly explained it. 5 playoff appearances in 25 years, and that included an 11-year gap where they made 0 playoffs, and that was when a lot of young fans were just kind of figuring out hockey in South Florida.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty remarkable, and I keep going back to the one thing, like it started with the ownership taking over in 2011, 2012, and hiring of Matt Caldwell, who's paid such meticulous attention to all the details, but for me it was that and then Bill Zito.
Yeah.
Because Bill Zito getting hired in September of 2020 was really the catalyst that's made so many changes. The first moves he made, Patrick Hornquist, Radko Gudas, and from that, it just set the culture, it set a tone, and it's been this amazing, just focus on exceptional, not just players, but people. Bringing in not just good guys at hockey, but guys that are good in the locker room. It's made this incredible, incredible team. Yeah, you just got to take a step back and revel in it, really.
Patrick Williams of NHL.com, he's their American Hockey League reporter. He is coming up next, and we're going to go into what's going on in the minor league system of the NHL. That's coming up next. All right, joining us right now is Patrick Williams. He writes about the American Hockey League for NHL.com, and right now the AHL is getting closer and closer to their playoffs. So let's start there. How does the playoff picture look right now in the AHL, Patrick?
Well, it's funny because it's such a complicated system. The four divisions. There's kind of three different formats for who qualifies and who doesn't, and there's buys involved. The long story short is 23 out of the 32 teams make it. The idea being NHL teams want their prospects to get playoff experience as much as possible. So there's a pretty low bar to qualify. But take for example, the Charlotte Checkers, who are Florida's affiliate, they're third place right now in the Atlantic Division, so they're sitting pretty quite nicely, in terms of their playoff positioning. But with this league, it's a league of streets. I say that all the time, and depending on who's called up, who's sent down, teams can kind of go on good runs, or slumps very quickly.
And those are obvious variables. The players getting called up for playoff runs for the NHL teams. But based on that, who has the best odds to win the Calder Cup this year?
Well, at this point, you'd have to say the Hershey Bears. They've run away with the entire league. They're 14 points ahead of the second overall team. They're right on the line right now of potentially setting the record for best point percentage in league history. It's a record that's stood for 32 years now. They need a little bit of a run here toward the end, but they're at 770 right now. The league record is 775, so they have a good shot to do that. They're the defending Cup champs as well, so right now you have to give the edge to them, at least as it stands at the moment.
So, Patrick, real quick, I wanted to ask if you could break down, because the AHL, the way that they construct their rosters is a little bit different, obviously, than they do it in the NHL. You kind of alluded to it before, that teams like to have their prospects getting playoff experience, and so much of AHL rosters are built of those development-type players. So if you could just kind of break it down real quick for us before we dive further into it.
Well, yeah, for one, there's no limit, unlike in the NHL where it's you have your 23 players and, there's cap considerations. There's no cap consideration. There's only your budget, essentially. And there's no limit to number of personnel. So those are the two big differences. The other big differences are that quite often late in the season, you'll see players that come over from Europe or either from junior or college. So you can sometimes get some, real big additions to your lineup late in the season. I think of a team like Cleveland a number of years ago. They added Zach Werenski right out of the University of Michigan late in the season. He came right in and was one of their top defensemen. They won the Cup that year. So, there's a lot more volatility in terms of the rosters. And you can be a team that looks maybe like a borderline playoff team, but say your NHL team misses the playoffs and you get 3 or 4 players that are sent down. All of a sudden that changes the whole look of your team, and vice versa. You can be a team that has been sailing along, and all of a sudden the NHL team calls up, a couple of your key players, and there go your playoff chances. So it's a much different dynamic than what we see in the NHL.
Who right now in the league do you see who can get called up for a playoff run, who can absolutely change the entire scope of that team's playoffs?
Oof.
That's a good question. Depending on kind of what you want. We've seen goalies come up in the past, like Connor Ingram a couple years ago, came up from the AHL, went up to Nashville, and kind of, at least for a little while, was kind of the hot story of the playoffs. So you can sometimes see a goalie do that. Earlier I would have said Logan Stankoven from Dallas. He was running away with the scoring title with the Texas Stars, but he has been called up. So he's a guy that probably was the most NHL ready player in the entire league. Just a player that quickly it became obvious that he was ready. There was really no further development needed.
So I did want to talk to you about another goaltender in the AHL who has been on fire lately. I don't think he's got He's a candidate to get called up, just the way that the Panthers situation is right now. But Spencer Knight has been, and Fuego for the Charlotte Checkers, who have also been on a nice little streak. As you mentioned, AHL teams going on streaks. Spencer's won, I think, 9 of his last 10 starts. He's got shutouts in 3 of his last 4. And Charlotte has been creeping their way up the Eastern Conference standings as well. Just in terms of, AHL, how well he's been playing, what have you seen, and how impressive has that been?
Obviously he had that well-documented, situation where he had to, step back and, work on some things off the ice. Clearly he did that, which was the first step for him to kind of get that part of his life squared away. He came back this year, went to the AHL. He was up and down a little bit early on, but I think one of the biggest differences you just see is just like his approach to the entire game. He's got that maturity to his game, the sense of you see with a lot of young goalies, that first year or two of their career at the pro level. I mean, they've had success everywhere. And in his case, he even had success at the NHL level. So, you come down and it's a much more chaotic type of style down in the AHL. You have a lot more younger players. The systems aren't quite as tight. So for goalies, that can be really tough. And, I think it took him a little bit of time to make that adjustment to what was going on around him on the ice. But he clearly has done that. And obviously now Charlotte is really starting to ride his hot streak. And, their team, if you ask around the league, their team, nobody wants to see in the first, second round of the playoffs. I mean, their team, I think that could be a very dangerous opponent, especially with the way the format is. You get either a best of 3 or a best of 5 early on in the playoffs. So, your playoff hopes can go off track very quickly in a short series like that, especially with a hot goalie like Knight.
Continuing to look at the Checkers right now, I assume the Panthers are going to call up Mackie Samoskevich, but the entire roster, if you look at it from a whole, who do you think the Panthers are going to call up for this playoff run?
Yeah, for one, the question becomes how many players do you want to call up versus, what you're trying to do at the AHL level. Typically, a team will for the most part, let the AHL level or the roster kind of be what it is until the AHL team's playoff postseason is over. And then you'll see, like last year with the Panthers, they brought up, whole group of players that were, kind of come in there and, sort of on reserve. Zach Dalpe was kind of the breakthrough player, the story last year where, he broke into the lineup and actually ended up really becoming kind of a regular down the stretch there, into the Stanley Cup Finals for the Panthers. So, but I think for the most part, a team like the Panthers, they've constructed a pretty typical AHL type roster where you have your mix of good, solid veteran guys, and then obviously like prospects like Samoskevich and Knight, players like that, and then kind of those guys that are, the glue guys in between that kind of hold everything together. So I think for right now, they would probably more or less stand pat, but certainly if Charlotte goes out early and Florida is playing later, you'll see a whole group of them called up. Guys like Samoskevich, Knight, et cetera.
It's something we've seen with the Charlotte Checkers the last couple of years. That's pretty common across the AHL. I wanted to ask you about is most recently Charlotte signed Ben Steeves from Minnesota Duluth as a college player. They get their ELC. He signed with Florida, but his ELC doesn't kick until next year, so he took a PTO with Charlotte to be with their AHL club to learn their systems and to get acclimated to pro hockey. Last year, we saw the same thing with Mackie Samoskevich and Ryan McAllister. Just in terms of the way that the process is to go from like a college player getting, dipping their toe into the pro game. How common is this in the AHL, and how much of an impact does this have? Because it's happening just as playoff time is getting started.
Yeah, it's a potentially a huge impact. Samoskevich, certainly showed a lot of promise, which you would expect in a top prospect like him. But he came in. I thought it was great for his development. Like I spoke with him earlier in the season, and it just gave him a taste of what he would expect long term. Had something to work with when he went into the summer. Into his off-season training program. Kind of had a sense of like, okay, this is what I'm up against in the AHL, to say nothing of what I'll have to deal with eventually full time in the NHL. So it's a chance to for a player to kind of dip their toe in the waters, get a sense of what they're up against, get to know some of the coaching staff better, get to know teammates, get playoff experience. Certainly, that's very helpful. He got a little bit, Sam Stugotz last season, so it's almost like I guess I would almost compare it to like kind of an internship, where you're probably getting hired full time later on, but this is just a chance to really kind of learn the business on the ground, and be kind of fully immersed in what the AHL team and by extension what the NHL team wants you to be doing.
Much like the NHL, the AHL has individual awards. The Les Cunningham Award is league MVP. The Red Garrett Award is Rookie of the Year. The Baz Bastian Award goes to the best goaltender, and the Eddie Shore Award goes to best defenseman. Who do you think will win those 4 trophies this year?
Well, yeah, MVP, it might be a former name that's probably familiar for a lot of Florida fans is Rocco Grimaldi. Good, solid veteran. Team he's with, Chicago, has struggled quite a bit. They're an interesting group because they're not affiliated. But he's kind of put that team, on his back. Adam Gaudette, a guy that's kind of been a bubble guy for a number of years. He's with the St. Louis system right now. He's right up there, among the top league leading goals. So those would be kind of my 2 early, MVP picks. Rookie of the Year, I mean, even though he's been up for a month now, Stan Coben, I think you have to go with. Goalie of the Year, I mean, depending on kind of the goalie of the year can be a little more complicated just because typically if you get really hot, like you're going up. Yeah. But I'll go with, a first rounder like Yaroslav Askarov in Milwaukee. He's probably one of the future, people in net for the Nashville Predators. And then, as far as just a top defenseman, like, it's probably more likely than not kind of a veteran guy, like a Brad Hunt in Colorado. He's 35 years old. He's one of those classic veteran guys, obviously on the back end of his career, but, the Colorado Avalanche have him down there both to be a leader and also, because at the AHL level, he's still a top-notch player. So, he would be my pick for your Eddie Shore top defenseman.
Patrick, you mentioned Hershey earlier, just the great season they're having, and they're a team that often has a very successful season in the AHL. And you see certain teams that always seem to do well, whether it's Hershey or a team like Providence. And I know that a lot of that has to do with how they're funded. And I just wanted to kind of ask you to dive into that a little bit on how the teams that are, a bit better funded in the AHL can go so much further.
Yeah, I mean, there's no cap. First of all, so you're not really restricted in that sense. You're only really restricted by your budget, and those teams you mentioned, Providence and Hershey. For one, they're in very good, stable affiliations. I mean, Providence and Boston, for example, have been together since 1992. Hershey and Washington, 2005. And it starts with a lot of commitment on the part of the NHL team to be willing to kind of fund those veteran players, and veterans drive a lot of success in the league. I mean, you have obviously your first, second round picks. Those guys are going to go on to long-term NHL careers, you hope, but they come in, they're 20 or 21 years old. They have a lot to learn. So they don't necessarily come in and dominate right away. It's your veterans that kind of like pull a lot of the weight. So teams like Providence, you look at Hershey, that's a great example. Syracuse with Tampa Bay is another example. They've always really invested in those veterans. And, if you're an AHL veteran, like the money, it's not what people think of typically as minor league salaries. I mean, the money is very good down. I mean, if you're a top vet, like you can make, let's say, $450 and up to around maybe $575. So like the money's really good. Like it's not NHL money, obviously, but it's certainly not money you're going to get in most walks of life. So certainly if you're a veteran, and you can also set yourself up down the road, like if, maybe eventually you want to transition into coaching or management. It's a real good pathway for guys, around 30 years old or so, who are maybe starting to look long-term toward their post-playing career. But in the meantime, they can still, pocket $500,000 a year playing in the minors. So it's not a bad arrangement for those guys.
Patrick Williams is the American Hockey League reporter for NHL.com. Patrick, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.